The truth is coming out now, and people are realizing, like, the government really doesn't care about us. They don't care. Man or woman sitting behind a desk, tell them what I've done, what I've seen, and they were going to be able to help me in any way, shape, or form.
At the end of the day, the 80-year-old you is going to be a different man if you live 40 years deficient in testosterone than the 80-year-old you who is replacing that testosterone.
Order, shot fire, officer down, shot fire, officer down. Got a city officer down, shot fire.
223, be advised, we have a visual on enemy paratroopers at grid Papa uniforms.
Welcome to the Resilient Warrior Nation, a podcast dedicated to inspiring hope and healing for first responders, military veterans, and anyone facing PTSD and trauma. Hey guys, welcome to another podcast episode of the Resilient Warrior Nation podcast. I'm your host, Mike Morgan. The shirt I'm wearing is not a proclamation. This is actually the company of a man named Eddie Penny. Eddie changed the trajectory of my life literally when in the spring of 2023, I sat down and watched an episode of the Sean Ryan podcast. During that episode, of which Eddie was a guest, Eddie was recounting the story of the Extortion 17 incident in which a Chinook was shot down in Afghanistan. And let me state that Eddie was a former Navy SEAL Team 6 guy himself. During the course of that incident, which killed 38 souls aboard, including 17 SEALs. His best friend, Jason Workman, was killed. Eddie was telling the story of escorting Jason's body back to his hometown. As Eddie was telling his story, he was upset, rightly so. I simultaneously began thinking about a call that I had had 5 years before that I had buried deeply. I'm a 30-year retired police officer, and I had a call of a beautiful young girl named Dana Sikorsky. She was 2 years old at the time, and she was found floating in a pool. That call broke my heart. No other words to say it, and I buried it deeply. But as I was listening to Eddie talk and watching him cry, I think subconsciously I was given permission to cry myself, and I began crying like a baby. Just watching this absolute warrior cry told me it was okay to do so. And I instantaneously realized that the feelings I had been experiencing for about a year and a half at that point after retirement were some sort of PTSD that I'd suffered during my career. I always mistakenly believed that PTSD is only caused by seeing your brother or sister next to you get killed. Mine was caused by being inside the most devastatingly intimate moments of other people's lives over and over and over and over. Once I realized that, I decided that I needed help. I was not going to be suffering from this for the rest of my life, being this ornery guy that hated everyone and everything, and started to, look at options for healing. I didn't think that I was going to be able to go to a traditional therapist, man or woman sitting behind a desk, tell them what I've done, what I've seen, and they were going to be able to help me in any way, shape, or form. So I've been seeing these men coming back from war, broken men, talking about healing through psychedelic therapies. And I realized that ayahuasca was calling me. I journeyed with ayahuasca last March 1st of 2024, and my life was literally changed over the course of a weekend. I tell people I was reborn in a non-religious sense. So the universe and I have been having a conversation that night. I know it sounds weird if you never experienced it, but literally just as I am talking right now, the universe and I were speaking, and the universe told me it had healed me, and my life's pursuit was to go forth and help other vets and first responders heal their traumas. So in that vein, I decided to do a few things, one of which being creating this podcast to do for others what was done for me by Sean Ryan. So as I go along in this podcast, I bring on ordinary people who've done extraordinary things with their lives. They'll tell you about their journeys, their highs, their lows, in the hopes that you can identify with them, get inspired, get hope, and realize that you too can heal. We are you, you guys are us. There is no difference. So I am very excited to introduce my next guest. We're going to go a little clinical today, and you guys. I have Dawn Thornhill as my next guest. Dawn is a family nurse practitioner and founder of Renew Wellness, a Texas-based wellness clinic that specializes in hormone optimization, medical weight loss, and functional medicine. She is a former IFBB figure pro and United States Air Force officer veteran. She has been in medicine for 25 years, having spent nearly a decade working with the VA healthcare system in St. Petersburg, Florida. She is an advocate for root cause medicine and preventative care and is currently studying for a doctorate in nursing practice with primary research in the veteran population, operator syndrome, and metabolic health. Dawn, welcome to the podcast. It is an honor to have you on.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And in the vein of full transparency, Dawn is my practitioner. So, she's getting the hometown field advantage here. I will be very, very easy on her. Not that she's got to worry about that, but Dawn, please tell everyone about yourself, where you grew up, how your childhood was. Just kind of let them get to know you a little bit.
Sure. So obviously I'm a nurse practitioner now, but I started off as a child, I wanted to be in law. My father was a Vietnam veteran. He was a Marine. Didn't talk a whole lot about his experience. I knew Daddy had served. My first conversation with him regarding that was the first time we watched the movie Hamburger Hill. If anyone's ever seen that movie, terrifying for a child, but to my father, he explained to me that was the closest he had ever seen to what his experience had been as a machine gunner, in Vietnam. And so we never really spoke a lot more about it until he got older. Daddy had terrible PTSD, drove his decision making in a lot of ways to make bad decisions that ultimately affected my family. So I had a lot of resentment for my dad. It took a very long time until he got very sick that I actually got my father back. He had colon cancer and rectal cancer. And in recovery from surgery from that procedure, he had a massive heart attack. He was 49 years old. And at that time, we struggled with the decision to keep him on life support and how long do we fight for him. And my mom stood by his side and we fought and he got better and he came home. Was never the same because he was much weaker after having the heart attack. And so he also had a lot of resentment. So I graduated high school, planning college. And of course, the recruiters are all over the place. And I wanted to join the military. So I took myself to a recruiter, Army recruiter. And they took me that day to Tampa to take my ASVAB, have a physical assessment. Like, I'm blown away how fast it was because when I commissioned ultimately at 40 later, it was a 2-year process. And so they were to get me in. So I had everything ready to go, went back home, told my father, and he said, like, hell you are.
So you had no idea that this is what you were going to do?
He had no idea. No, I was going to be a lawyer as far as he knew.
Okay.
So, he marched me back up there, embarrassed me to death, telling them my daughter's not joining the military. Had to change my direction. Then ultimately, daddy's illness, I got very involved in his health care. So, wound care. He had a leg amputation. He actually had a penile amputation, which was, horrendous for him. It just was with Agent Orange. He ultimately passed away 8 years ago in the hospital.
My condolences.
Thank you. But I will tell you, if it was not, and I hear this a lot of negativity about the VA, and I know there's some good things about the VA and there's some really terrible things about the VA. But I can personally say in my experience, I probably got another 10 years of time with my father that was quality life because of his care at the VA. So it was the hospital I worked at. So I was very involved in that process and in every department that he went through. But he ultimately died in our hospice. And that setting on his deathbed, I came to him and I said, Daddy, I really would like to have your blessing to join the Air Force Reserve. And he said, well, the Air Force, the Chair Force, of course, he didn't mind that. It was political. It was the Air Force. He didn't realize that the military today, even Marine Corps, is very different than the military he experienced.
Right.
And so he passed away before I commissioned. And so I joined the Air Force Reserve flight nurse out of MacDill. And it was not what I expected. I was
How so?
very disappointed in how disjointed everything was. The system is so big that, I always explain this when people ask me, what was it like? To get from A to B, you got to go 37 other places first. And there's so many people involved and so many people that have to give sign off. And it was just so much poor communication. And I just was really frustrated. And I thought, I understand now how an enlisted member might feel trapped in this situation and frustrated with this situation. And so I was working at the VA, still working in vascular surgery, but I was working part-time doing hormones with a clinic in Tampa, doing telemedicine and working in my own fitness career, becoming a bodybuilder and trying to find where I might fit in that, as a woman and older. And so I encountered a lot of veterans. I started to recognize a common thread with these guys, that they were all having very poor hormones. They were having a lot of dysregulation with their nervous system, poor sleep, just like a cascade of things that came from the low hormone levels. And the disruption of their production of cortisol and things like that. So I started doing a lot more research into that and recognizing where that connection was coming from. Why the veteran population, particularly because some of these males were, 35, 37 years old prior to the typical age of andropause. Why are we seeing such low hormones? And then
Excuse me, when you say low hormones, is it testosterone purely, or are there other things involved?
No, it's actually, testosterone, DHEA, and pregnenolone, which are your precursors to testosterone, cortisol, human growth hormone, and just ultimately the cascade of effects, the downstream effects of those hormones being low on things like arteries, neuroplasticity, brain function, obviously sexual function, mood regulation, your ability to respond to stress, those kind of things. And so I was doing a lot of research, and I discovered also that the people who suffer post-traumatic stress disorder, we can highly correlate their hormone levels at the time of the trauma to the extensity of that PTSD. For instance, somebody who was in range with poor hormone health and poor metabolic health has a higher risk in a traumatic situation to have PTSD. So I thought, gosh, why isn't this included in the readiness panel? We're doing labs, vaccines. Why not look at those hormones? And if they're low, A, replace them, or B, don't send this man, woman into this situation that's going to ultimately, potentially end their career. And of course, there's not a whole lot of buy-in from the DoD pertaining to
money, right? Absolutely. A lot of money involved here if you're going to start testing.
Yes. And when it comes to, on top of that, service connection, if we're recognizing, oh man, we put them in this situation, we didn't do what we needed to do to protect them. There's a service connection relation there. And then the effects of the low hormones now, in addition to the PTSD, because anyone who works or lives in an environment where there's a constant fight or flight response, your police officers, any first responders, even one study I found was a young man in Compton, in a constant fight or flight situation, dysregulates their endocrine system and their ability to respond to stress, their hormone production. And so, we're recognizing the effects of that. And so I really just wanted to get more out there. I wanted people to understand that this is something that we can impact naturally. We might not be able to make it amazing, but somebody with poor hormones, if they're sedentary, they're not resistance training, they're drinking too much alcohol, they're not taking care of themselves well, malnourishment, their gut is not healthy, they're potentially, going to have poor hormone production, we can get them feeling better first, and we can get them healthier first. And so that was my intention really, with my studies, was to try to get more research and more interest in funding research for these types of situations so that we can prevent operator syndrome from occurring. And we've kind of rebranded it. I'm working with a group of former operators here in the San Antonio area, and we're actually calling it service action syndrome because operator syndrome sounds very exclusive to the military. But it's not just your high-level Tier 1 operators who go through this. It could be someone who went through a traumatic experience at SEER school. It's across the board. It's something that needs to be evaluated prior to sending someone into that situation, and then also before when they're discharged, when we're looking at ultimately their final saying goodbye to the military. When we're doing those assessments, we need to be looking at hormone health as well, so we can make sure we set you up for success and to not suffer ultimately, and your health suffer.
Yeah, it makes sense. So now, if say you have a healthy male, hormonal values are all checked, they're good, you have a baseline for this guy, is it something where you can almost guarantee, say we're talking about a Tier 1 operator, he's conditioned to war fighting, something traumatic happens, so he gets into, an elongated battle, is it something where you essentially the next day or in a short time period after that, if you were to take other bloods, you're going to see those hormonal levels plummet?
They actually have
something like that guaranteed.
There's an immediate response. There's a natural pituitary feedback loop that our body works on. So a lot of times that initial response is in a sense corrected to a certain extent and over time. But in the long term, the more frequent the person goes through this, the more likely they are to experience that dysregulation. And, I was just talking to an officer that's a patient of mine currently, SAPD, and he brought something to light that really hit me that I hadn't considered. And that was that these operators that I'm talking to and we're dealing with, they are on a cycle. You know, they go home from this situation and they heal a little bit and then they go back to that situation. Our police officers, they're living this day in, day out for the span of a career. And not only that, this is occurring in their home. This is occurring at their children's school. They drive past this neighborhood, you know, this corner where they maybe experience something to go to the grocery store once a week. I mean, they can't separate from it because it's their life, it's their home, it's their world. And the extent of it, I think, is even worse. And same for firefighters and first responders.
Yeah, it's a very unique situation. I remember on a couple of my podcasts I was speaking to, I remember one SEAL in particular, a second was Green Beret, and we were discussing seeing traumatic events in our respective careers. And each of those guys turned around and they're like, bro, you know, my thing was this way, but once that situation was over, man, we're out of it. He's like, I can't imagine being a cop or a fireman where you guys are just constantly going from one to the next to the next. And then you're supposed to go home and flip that switch and be a normal dude to your family. You know, excuse my French. They're like, I don't know how the fuck you guys do it. You know, we go back, we're having, you know, fireside therapy sessions at night. He's like, I can't imagine having to go home to my wife after, you know, some of these things that we went through that day. You know, they're like, we don't know how you do it. And it's so funny because you know, we're looking at them and being like, man, the stuff that these guys see. And they turn around and saying the same thing about us.
Mutual.
So it's like a universal principle, so to speak, right?
Absolutely. It's unfortunate because, you know, although the VA isn't amazing or the varying degrees of amazing, I guess, the VA is there to support them. And I don't understand that there is any type of organization for you guys, that there's anything when you get out, you know, that support you after. And
Nothing.
And I understand, you know, service connection and the medical side of it, but it's more than just that. And it's more than just PTSD. I mean, it's a whole body effect when you have these traumatic experiences. We assume it's just a psychological thing, but I mean, ultimately it affects so much. I mentioned the gut. 50 to 90% of your serotonin and dopamine, your happy hormones, are produced in the gut. So if that the microbiome is imbalanced, the gut's all inflamed and bloated, and you're not absorbing nutrients well, and you're not making those neurotransmitters that help your mood, I mean, you're just going to feel terrible. And it's something as simple as, you know, a functional test that looks at the gut microbiome and replacing the flora that you don't have in the gut that you need because it's been washed away by continual stress and alcohol and things like that. Or maybe you have too much of a certain flora that's leading to leaky gut, which is causing all this bloat and imbalance and inability to absorb nutrients and things like that. Ultimately, something as simple as the gut can make a big difference in how a patient feels in their health and their recovery with their PTSD. And it's more of a whole body targeted approach versus just looking at psychological therapy and neurotransmitters and things like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you know, we speak about PTSD and we do classify it as like a psychological thing and nothing else. But there are components, and as you're saying now, hormonally attached to it, and I think it's getting a little more credence. I mean, it's slowly we're developing more information. I mean, you've been immersed in this for years, but you know, us knuckle draggers now, it's kind of filtering down to us, and we realize, you know, how important everything ties into one another. So let me ask you, like a typical PTSD, you know, a guy who's suffering, a girl who's suffering for that instance, is it almost like 100% man to man or girl to girl that you're seeing these other hormonal effects being attached to them? In other words, would you see someone that's suffering from, you know, maybe moderate to severe PTSD, but everything else hormonally could be healthy, or no? Is it rare?
Ish. I mean, it truly depends on their baseline where they begin. So if you have somebody who is physically fit and active and never really drank a lot of alcohol, they took good care of themselves, they went right into the military at 18 years old, that may be somebody who lives naturally with a better production of hormones than somebody who was maybe sedentary and not taking good care of themselves and made a change to be able to go into that field. Their baseline may have been much lower. So if we're starting here versus here, I mean, that dip is going to be much more visible. They're going to physically feel it a lot sooner. There's a high predictability that if we know somebody has PTSD or complex PTSD, I see the diagnosis on their intake form. I know that I need to look at specific things: their sleep, their intake of food. Are they avoiding endocrine disrupting chemicals, because that's going to further worsen the situation? Are they eating a balanced diet, getting all of the flora from the fruits and vegetables? Or are they just kind of a meat and potato guy, and we need to give them we need to replace that bacteria that they need in their gut? Are they having constipation and not having bowel movements? So they're now reabsorbing hormones that they should be detoxing from. So they're crazy estrogen dominant, which is going to affect the mood and the bloating and things like that. So it's very specific to each individual, but you can almost guarantee that if somebody has tremendous PTSD, their hormones are affected for sure.
Yeah, it makes sense, because if you're suffering from that at that level, it doesn't, most people I don't think are going to be living those healthy lifestyles that, maybe they're getting like crippling depression or other things that are affecting them. And, frankly, it's not a situation where you're going to see guys running out to the gym on the daily. It's going to be a fight to get to the gym, or eating well, or the big one. And, it's only coming out now to me anyway, is sleep. How important sleep is, and how many people are suffering from bad or lack of sleep. Can you just discuss that? Because I think it's a huge problem that I've just become aware of, to be honest with you.
Absolutely. So you have to understand our sleep and our circadian rhythm is very much influenced by your production of human growth hormone and your hormones in general, cortisol. So think of somebody who's a little insulin resistant and your cortisol spikes in the middle of the night. That's your typical pattern in the middle of the night between 2 and 4 a.m. Your cortisol is going to reach its highest point. So you're already stress induced. You've already got that elevated cortisol and insulin or glucose, because you're not producing adequate insulin from stress. So now, middle of the night, cortisol spikes. What happens? Your insulin grabs onto that glucose and shoves it right into the cells of the brain, wakes the brain up. GABA is probably already on the lower side because you've been chronically stressed. So GABA's role is kind of calming the brain and shutting the signal down so that you can stay asleep at night. So those people, they may fall asleep, but they're waking up frequently throughout the night. Get up to go to the bathroom, you're wide awake and you're not able to go back to sleep. Couple that with someone who has, night terrors or somebody who's going through, a relationship situation, because PTSD often leads to disrupted relationships. Those people are in the middle of the night feeling their worst, not sleeping, insomnia, just miserable. And then, this is a prolonged situation. So you're chronically under-rested and under-recovered. And you mentioned, you're not going to want to get up and go to the gym. I've discovered that my approach can't be, hey, Mike, this is what we're seeing with your hormones. We're going to get your hormones dialed in, but I want you to go to the gym. I want you to work on, eating 150 grams of protein a day and getting 4 servings of veggies. And you're like, yeah, right. I feel like crap. The last thing I'm going to do is worry about going to the gym and counting how much water I'm drinking.
Yeah.
It's kind of a stair-step approach. First, I have to get them feeling a little bit better. Get the hormones. That's the first thing you're going to notice when you're deficient, is getting the hormones dialed in, having more mental clarity and energy and endurance to even attempt to have motivation to make changes. And when you've gone from being this specimen of a man in the role where you're very fit and active and you're a pillar of your community as an officer, to now being out of shape, you're having issues with your wife, you're maybe having some ED because of the testosterone being low, you're not sleeping well, I kind of have to get them feeling better and start getting and build some trust with the relationship. Right.
Yes.
And I start getting a little bit more buy-in, because now their belt's coming in a little bit and their waist is coming back and they're feeling a little bit better. And so how can I get more of this? Well, maybe have you take a walk after dinner every day. Let's focus on that. Just a walk with your wife for 30 minutes after dinner. And they start seeing the effects of that. And okay, now let's try a little bit of resistance training. Maybe we're going to do a little CrossFit or somewhere where you have some community, but it's not fix right away. It's let's get you feeling better and we'll chip away at it and we'll get you feeling. Ultimately, I have a patient who just ran a half marathon, prosthetic. He had been forever. Really? He wouldn't have gone out and run a 5K, once the prosthetic was fitting better, but over time he wants more. He wants to be an athlete again. He wants to be active again. And that he's recognizing that when he does that, he feels better. And so it's a slow process, but it can be tremendous for somebody who's been deficient for a long time to get just even beginning with just getting the hormones dialed in, and then starting to understand how much control you actually do have over your health and your emotions by doing these things, to get the health better with, fitness and nutrition and sleep, water intake, those kind of things.
Yeah, I mean, I think that many of us mistakenly believe that PTSD and some of these trauma-based diagnoses are purely psychological related, when in fact you throw in the physical aspect that you're speaking about right now, and it's like compounded exponentially in terms of how bad they're feeling and what's the causation, actual causation factors, because it's not solely this mental piece. There's a lot more to this. It's almost like a puzzle that you kind of, putting the pieces in for these guys, and it makes total sense. But to the guys and girls who are going through it right now, it's not just that mental aspect. I know, a lot of us think it is, but as you're hearing Dawn say, there are many, many things that, number one, you can do for yourself to feel better, and number two, frankly, you have to do it for yourself, because if they're out of whack, it's like a yin and a yang. If one's out of whack, the other one's not going to fit, or be optimized, so to speak.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sometimes it
And
takes kind of an eye opener, that moment where you see those labs in black and white in front of you. And I'm telling you, look, you are going to be diabetic if you don't do something about this. Or, you do have some control over this metabolic syndrome that you're experiencing. We can get you feeling better. It's just having someone trust me enough to be able to prove to them that I can help them feel better. And truly, the numbers on paper aren't what drive therapy when it comes to hormone replacement therapy and peptide therapy. Really, the patient's experience, the patient's subjective feedback is what should drive therapy. Because I've discovered over the years that what is optimal for you, what is optimal for my husband, my brother, are all very different. We're all very different human beings genetically, our lifestyle, the extent at which, sedentary versus active, our nutrition, our alcohol consumption, everyone's a little bit different. And where you feel your best, we've got to kind of find that for you. And that takes constant follow-up and feedback. And, hey, how are you sleeping? How's your mood? How's your energy? Just being intentional with your actions. I had a conversation with my husband the other day, because I was talking to a patient about dopamine, and I was telling her, you need to do more things that give you dopamine. When you start to recognize that you're feeling happy.
what does that do? Just tell people.
Yeah.
Dopamine.
So what's that?
Just can you kind of tell people about dopamine, what it does for you? People
Sure.
don't know.
Yeah, so dopamine is a neurotransmitter. It is produced when we do things that we enjoy, and it drives a lot of our behaviors, compulsive behaviors. Sometimes our choices of what we eat come from our brain seeking dopamine. It's not really that we want a burger or we want cheesecake, it's that we want dopamine, and our brain remembers that having done that gave us dopamine. So if you think of your brain kind of like a forest, you walk a path through that forest enough times, it creates a well-worn path. Our brain will work that way. It functions that way. So if your behaviors that make you feel better are unhealthy pathways, we can create new pathways and let that one grow over. And this is something that I've learned with myself. I live in San Antonio, so we're near Kerrville where the floods were, and we were going down there to help the Sawyers drop off some gas, do some cleanup and stuff. And the windows were wound on our truck, and the sun was shining on my arm. And I joked, I told my husband, I'm like, I like trees. And he was like, are you okay? And I said, oh, just recognizing, like, this makes me feel good. Like, we're out in the sun, we're together, we're doing things that we're helping people. Like, I feel really good. I want to do more of this. And when you recognize something, you're out with your wife dancing or whatever it might be, the gym, reading a book, going for a walk in the forest. There's actually studies that show that walking through the forest raises dopamine higher than many other things. Something to do with that environment our brain likes. And so when you recognize those things that you do that are healthy coping mechanisms and healthy things that make you feel good and give you dopamine, that moment after a good workout, a hard workout, when you get in the car and you just feel good, do more of those things, because it will create more pathways to want to seek those types of things.
Yeah, when you talk about that runner's high, that's exactly what it is, correct?
Absolutely.
That dopamine hit. Yeah. And it's amazing, because nature is free. Nature's everywhere around us. And it's one of the greatest things you can do to ground yourself and just kind of find peace with yourself. I mean, I kind of entered, my wife and I entered this psychedelic space where we met, incredible people over the past year. And one of the common themes is nature. Just get out and be in nature. And there's nothing like it. It can't be replicated by anything else. And it's so simple and it's all around us. Yeah. Get out from that couch, stop watching TV, go outside and just walk. I mean, it does so much for your mental health.
It does. It does. And a lot of times you don't realize it until you're in the moment. So you do have to have that initial kind of genesis. You have to get the ball rolling. You've got to take control of the situation and start recognizing that you do have control over some of this. Maybe not all of it, but we can take steps that are going to make you feel better, but you've got to be agreeable to doing the things. And like I said, I can't ask somebody to immediately do all the things, but I can start and we can build on that.
Right.
You'll want more of it when you start to recognize that you step on the scale and you see it move. You put on a pair of pants that you haven't worn in forever. Those small wins just kind of raise and raise and raise the motivation.
Yeah, that's the truth. And I'll tell you, one thing I wish that we did more of is you're talking about helping these guys with their hormone levels. And this is not applicable to women as much because you guys talk frankly and open up to each other. We would let ourselves just be a little more vulnerable and talk about our feelings and tell your brother next to you, like, hey, I'm seeing Dawn and she's helping me do A, B, and C. And, we're working on my testosterone, whatever, hormonal levels. And I'm feeling like a new man right now. If guys would just talk to each other, because it's so funny. You bring a subject up and you're the guy to break the ice about whatever it is in terms of, something that we kind of hold close to the vest. All of a sudden, everyone wants in on it and they'll start talking about it. But you just need that one guy to break the ice. So, you guys, again, girls openly talk about things much more than we do. But if you're going through these things and you're finding these breakthroughs, talk to your boys about it too, because I guarantee everyone else is feeling the same stuff. We all think we're alone until we talk to someone else and you find out he's feeling the same way.
Me too.
And then he's feeling the same way. And everyone's feeling the same way. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. And that's why this is important, because a lot of people don't know. What you don't know, right? And so
Exactly.
you hear about how much hormones affect your energy and your mood. Everyone thinks about sex drive and erections when they think about testosterone. You can have low testosterone and have completely normal libido and erections if you've got, plenty of DHEA. So a lot of guys think, well, it works, so I must be okay. And that's not necessarily the case. It could be really influencing your anxiety, your insomnia, your muscle soreness, your muscle wasting, which if you look at any of the studies, you'll see that you can highly predict longevity based on how much skeletal muscle you have. So if we can
Really?
so 100% grip strength and skeletal muscle are two of the best predictors of longevity. And then of course, vitality, because the more muscle you have, the more support you have to that frame, to those joints. So, it's not just about sex drive with sex hormones anyway.
Yeah, that's funny because I was under a mistaken impression that's what it was. It encompassed mostly libido. I remember when I first started doing TRT, probably about 10 years ago, I went to the doc, my libido was low. I'm like, I need to try this. It was kind of in its infancy, maybe a little longer than that, 12 years. And, I was telling him, like, doc, I just want to be able to insert the word there until I die. I need to have a good libido, man. There's no way that this is it at 40 something years old. And I can't imagine the, men of yesteryear, like entering their mid 40s, early 50s, and they were done because there was no testosterone replacement therapy. Those poor guys, but we're definitely not facing the same thing. There's so many medical breakthroughs that, we've experienced and that these guys can experience if you just kind of, they don't even have to raise your hand, just make an appointment and go to the doctor. It's there for the taking.
Well, the problem is a lot of people run into a situation where let's say they explain that I'm feeling depressed, I'm not sleeping well. The first thing most primary care providers want to do is give you an SSRI or an SNRI. They want to give you a sleeping pill. They want to give you a phentermine, a weight loss drug, versus looking at, and this is why I always talk about root cause medicine. What is the root of the condition? So many men, especially first responders and veterans, suffer from chronically low vitamin D. Just giving them some vitamin D can be a total game changer.
Really?
For their mood, their energy, their muscle synthesis. So maintaining muscle, building muscle. And I do see in the veteran population specifically, I'm in San Antonio, so, military city. I see a lot of, there's so many, you could throw a stone and probably hit 4 bases. So we have a lot of veterans and active DOD that I see, and they're almost all chronically deficient in vitamin D. And that's an easy fix. You know, we can just give you some vitamin D with K2 and you're going to be feeling a lot better just from that.
So what is that causation to be low in
Well,
vitamin D?
why is it low? Well, it plays.
Yeah.
It's part of the cascade of the chronic stress,
Ah.
chronic inability to sleep. You know, you sleep deprivation and trauma. It affects the production of vitamin synthesis of vitamin D.
It's so funny. Never heard that. See, you don't know what you don't know.
And the hormone
Yes, just learn it.
regulation does as well. I mean, women in menopause are chronically vitamin D deficient as well. This nation is chronically malnourished. I mean, our food today is just not the same food that we used to eat. Even if you're eating so much food, because of factory farming, the nutrients aren't in the soil, the minerals aren't in the soil that used to be in our soil. So imagine a tomato today and a tomato at the turn of the century. The nutrients are completely different. So we sometimes have to supplement with those nutrients with nutritional supplementation.
So is there essentially or essential supplements that you would tell anyone that, any male that comes in there or female, like you need to be taking this, no question,
I mean,
in terms of, like vitamin D?
ideally, we're going to get our nutrients from our nutrition if we can. So we're going to start there. We can do some testing to look at how they're absorbing their nutrients and their nutrient levels. But I will say, if you're struggling with PTSD specifically, your vitamin D, your magnesium, and your omegas are very, very important. Vitamin D, of course, we mentioned. Your magnesium helps with muscle recovery and neuroplasticity. It helps relax and sleep. And then your omegas, your hormones are made, cholesterol is what we make our androgens from. So if we don't have the right good cholesterols, those unsaturated fats to make the cholesterols, then, we're not going to be able to produce them as well. So getting enough of those good fats in your diet is really important. Your avocados, your cashews, peanut butter, those type of fats are really important for not only your androgen production, but every cell in your body has a cell wall that's made of a phospholipid bilayer, a fat bilayer. So we have as a nation and in medicine in general, we've crushed cholesterols for decades. And now we're recognizing we made a big mistake because we're seeing huge rises in dementia and Alzheimer's and just oxidization. And we've caused it just by crushing cholesterol levels. And I think it was like 82 or 84, we had a study come out that was very biased. And basically we took the normal total cholesterol level of 350 on the top end and brought it down to 200. And so and it was outside of that range, here's a statin, here's a statin, here's a statin. Well, now look at what we're facing. So good fats are very important. And your arteries need to be healthy. Whether you have high cholesterol or low cholesterol, you're not going to see the blockages in the arteries if the arteries are healthy. The inner lining of the arteries are smooth muscle. And if it's not damaged, plaque's just going to float on by. But if there's any fray or damage, it's going to catch. And so your good fats, your HDL, is what kind of heals the inner lining of those arteries, lays that down nice and smooth. And then inflammation also. If you can imagine the artery itself is a straw. Imagine that straw was thick and swollen. Well, the inner lumen where the blood flows is going to be narrowed. So keeping that inflammation down or getting that inflammation down is also important. And PTSD causes chronic inflammation. Dysregulation of the nervous system causes chronic inflammation. Really, the root of all disease is inflammation.
Okay. And a good diet is essential, and it's going to tone down a ton of that inflammation, correct? Just a good diet, eating plan itself.
Yeah, the low FODMAP diet's a great diet for reducing inflammation. Basically, just eliminating highly inflammatory foods, avoiding herbicides and pesticides. I know it sounds kind of granola, but it's really important because they spray glyphosate on so much of our foods, and it's very inflammatory. So if you can do organic, if it's available and you can afford it, go with the organic because you're going to avoid those endocrine disrupting chemicals and inflammatory chemicals that we're, in a sense, being poisoned with by our environment. People just assume that our government protects us from that with regulations, but they're not realizing that we're getting just a little bit from everything. You're getting the microplastics with the BPA and the phthalates. You're getting the herbicides and the pesticides from farming and, GMO modifying our seeds. And so they're making the foods that we eat different so that it grows better so they can make more money. Well, in making those changes, what are those effects on our endocrine system and our brain health and our gut health? So the most beneficial thing you can do for yourself when it comes to diet is eating whole foods, single ingredient whole foods. a piece of chicken or fish or a lean piece of beef or turkey with a vegetable and a grain, a simple potato or some rice versus, rice pilaf out of a box. It's got all these fillers and additives that are put in there to let it sit on a shelf for a long time, not for any kind of nutritional value.
Right. Yeah. I mean, everything's monetarily related. It's amazing just to maximize profits. And talking about cholesterol, I remember when I was young, the number, as you said, was 350, was much higher than it is now. Now it's down at 2. Are they thinking about reclassifying the threshold, so to speak?
There's a push for it. I think with the Maha movement and a little bit like Casey Means and Callie Means talking to legislators, and there's a push for a more natural approach to health in general. People aren't trusting of the healthcare system since COVID, so they're looking for new ways to be healthy. They're open to emerging modalities and changes. So I think that we can get some new funding and into studies and new studies, or kind of disprove some of the older studies that we now know have been so biased. It's possible. I personally don't have a lot of faith in our current healthcare system. It's frustrating as a provider to be in it because I'm trained in allopathic medicine. But now looking back, I'm angry that there's so much that I didn't know, that I wasn't taught to be able to take care of my patients. And nutrition is not something that's taught, and recognizing the effects of these chemicals is really important. And it's my job to be able to recognize when I look at someone's labs or when I talk to someone and they tell me their symptoms, that they're full of heavy metals or, toxins that they need to chelate and bind and get rid of, things like that. So, I'm hopeful. There's definitely a paradigm shift occurring right now. And I think it's people like you talking about it and getting the information out there, the biohackers all over social media, who people are starting to recognize that there's something behind what they're saying. It's not just granola. It's not just granola medicine. It's not just snake oil.
Exactly. I think people are waking up. Unfortunately, the stuff that we were spoon fed during COVID, the truth is coming out now, and people are realizing, like, man, the government really doesn't care about us.
Yeah.
They don't care. I mean, it's a monetarily run system. Big pharma runs the world, so to speak. Just with these psychedelics, I was talking to someone the other day, and just the fact that ayahuasca is classified as a level 1 narcotic is all you need to know, because it's not right for abuse. I know there's maybe they're thinking no medicinal value, but there is.
But we've
And the
known
fact that
there is. We've known for
yeah,
decades. The evidence has been there.
the fact that these guys, the companies are all trying to synthesize versions of these medicines, again, tells you all you need to know. If they didn't think they worked, then they wouldn't be doing that. But it's going to be miraculous the day that those guys come up with those versions. All of a sudden, it's going to be legal, correct?
Well,
As
and
soon as they can monetize.
unfortunately, it's going to be patented, which is going to be a huge time. We're dealing with this with the GLP-1s. We're discovering there's such tremendous benefit from this medication class. It's reducing inflammation, joint inflammation. They've got a whole group of, we call them the Ozempic babies, these women with PCOS that were infertile and now they're accidentally getting pregnant because of their weight loss drug. And we're recognizing the effects on neuroplasticity. There's actually a study that just came out, I think it was yesterday or the day before, great rigor, that showed positive effects on breast cancer in mice with the GLP-1s. I mean, if we can pay more attention to preventative medicine in this country, I think we'd be miles ahead of where we're at right now. But we are very reactive. And right, big pharma runs the system because they've got the money, and we're giving them hand over foot. We're giving them the money. And I can tell you right now, you're not deficient in Prozac. That's not your problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Deeper than that. And let's find the root of that. Yes, there's a time and a place for Prozac, but you show me one study that looks at the results or the effects of 20 years of SSRIs, because I haven't found it. I've only seen short.
That's amazing. What's crazy is I was at a particular ayahuasca retreat for first responders and veterans, and I was speaking to a Green Beret who had been on 11 medications at one point. He drank ayahuasca. He weaned off prior to, drank. That was it. He never suffered from depression again. He hasn't been on since. This is probably a year or two later that we're speaking. And he said, Mike, what's crazy? He said, there's no stigma whatsoever. I would mention 11 medications. No one would bat an eye. He goes, the second I talk about ayahuasca and drinking, he's like, people look at me sideways like I was out of my mind. I was like, Larry, that's insane. I mean, that's how conditioned we are. This has been used for thousands of years. It's shown to be so effective in eliminating so many things. Yet, if you tell someone that, and I get it constantly, like I could see when the second I bring it up to someone, you can tell right off the bat if they're turned off or not. And I don't try to push it on anyone. As soon as you see that they're looking at me like that, if you want to ask questions, cool. But I don't. At that point, I back off. It is incredible
Yeah.
how conditioned we are.
Absolutely. We're seeing a lot of our governor and some of our legislators here in Texas are big proponents of the psychedelic therapy for veterans and even THC for veterans. I mean, some of our veterans that have PTSD, that the only way they can sleep is with a THC gummy, and they're treating them as
Me. That's all I can sleep with.
using drugs that are going to kill them. And there's therapeutic benefits. It just needs to be obviously regulated safely. But we can do that just like we have with everything else within big pharma. Everything else within the pharmaceutical realm, we regulate it. And the synthetic stuff is okay. So what's wrong with looking at the natural stuff?
Right. Yeah, it's incredible. Literally no manufacturing process whatsoever. Ayahuasca is two vines, essentially tree and a vine boiled together, done. Psilocybin, essentially growing in the ground. No manufacturing process whatsoever. Yet we're conditioned to think that these things are drugs. And it's so funny because I'll make posts periodically on Instagram, and people who are not in the know talk about, especially out of country, you Americans just look to get high. I'm like, this medicine doesn't get you high. It can be the most painful, profound journey you ever experienced in your life. It's not enjoyable a lot of times. Nothing gets you high.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because ketamine has been FDA approved in the US for a very long time. So very similar, the two.
Yeah. And do you have experience in ketamine therapy? I'm talking to more guys who have gone like the natural route, so to speak, than ketamine. But how has ketamine, like, I don't know if you can even answer this question, but how is it stacking up compared to like the natural, so to speak, like psilocybin and ayahuasca and ibogaine?
It's definitely effective. It's more effective and more of kind of like a microdose situation is what we're seeing. You're not going to have like a one-time experience, less likely with ketamine.
Okay.
Where ayahuasca may be a one-time experience. Somebody who's been tremendously affected by PTSD can be a new man after one experience with psychedelics like ayahuasca. And we're not quite seeing that as far as my understanding with the ketamine. It's more of a over a period of time, but coupled with other modalities, types of therapies, it's very beneficial. And I don't prescribe it. I'm not, I've got my lane I walk in, but definitely am a proponent of it. And I'm not adverse to referring patients to clinics to try to help them find someone that can provide the care they need, because it is effective. And I live in an area where we have a big population dealing with the psychological effects of war and service in general. So there's a lot around here. Austin is a very big area for the ketamine therapy. The ayahuasca, generally, you have to leave the state, the country. I know of a shaman that'll meet you in this place, in this mansion, and you come in and they'll do your ceremony, and but you have to do it behind closed doors and secretly. Dr. Hubbard, I believe is his name, huge for here in Texas.
Yeah. Again,
Listen to that man talk for days. He is just amazing. And
it's so funny because the first time I ever heard him speak, I think it was on Joe Rogan with Rick Perry. And I went right to his Instagram. I wrote him a quick little DM. Love to have you on the show. I think he had like 2,500 followers. I think at last look, he had like 30,000. This is in a matter of like 3 months or something like that. So his message is definitely catching on.
He's about it. And you can't question how educated the man is. He's brilliant.
No. Yeah, he really is. And, you see these results. You're talking to these guys. Mostly men, but women too, who are going through these treatments, literally changing their life in a matter of hours. And you cannot deny the success rate that this is causing. I mean, it's incredible stuff. When I first became aware of it, to be honest with you, I was pessimistic. I was like, what the hell? I'm no hippie, and like a lot of guys. And then I started listening closer.
Touch that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm also hearing on the other side of it, I've had some veterans who've had the experience and they're angry because they could have been better a long time ago had company opened this door for them. And this is the government's job. This is our job. If we're gonna put you in that situation, we make a promise to us to put your life on the line. We make a promise to you that we've got your six when you need us, and we haven't. We haven't. I mean, the VA is the biggest guilty organization of polypharmacy and synthetic
Hell
medicine.
yeah.
And you can
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk to guys and they're like, multiple guys. There's another medic that was on 17 medications from the VA. I didn't put a guy on 17 meds, number one. But he said, Mike, I felt nothing on a daily. Nothing.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I met with a former tier 1 operator. He owns a company out here, Grunt Style, Tim Jensen, and he lost a friend recently, one of his best friends, and he was an operator, and he very firmly believes that the medications that they had him on played a role in his decision to take his life, and that is gut wrenching to somebody who gave their life for this nation, and it's frustrating.
Yeah, it is 100%. I'll tell you one of the other things that I've experienced myself, and I didn't give it the credence that it deserved, was when, I got medically retired, so it wasn't my choice. But I didn't realize the effects that it would have on me. I did 30 years. I was no longer this thing. I was no longer part of this thing. I no longer had that brotherhood. What do you see with your vets that are getting out and going through these things? Maybe at that point they don't have a purpose, the next, mission to go to. Like, what are you seeing and what are the answers for these guys and girls who are going through it, in your opinion?
I truly believe that service to others is what heals in a lot of ways. And the success stories that I've seen, that's been the case. It's been service to others. It's been doing like what you're doing, something that you experience that helps to heal you. You want to give that to other people and you want to reach other people. I think that that's huge. Obviously, physical fitness, activating the muscle, man, there's nothing better than a good workout on your hormone health, your happy hormones, your neurotransmitters, just your mood in general. But it's people like you who are disseminating information to the population, getting the information out there that there are other options, there are ways that we can be healthy and we can work together. And I do think that service to others is a big part of it. That's who you are. It's what you've always done. And when you've left that community, or you feel like that community left you, you're medically retired. I see a lot of young men who are still in the DOD. And it's funny because I've seen it very different. I've had one patient come to me, is this going to be registered anywhere if you put me on testosterone? Is my command going to find out because I'll lose my job? And then on the other side of it, and this doesn't like in my situation, a flyer, where flight physicals are involved and you can't be on certain medications. This basic, he's an infantryman or whatnot. And then I've also had someone come to me and say, I will be medically discharged if I don't treat this hypogonadism. And I'm like, I don't understand this. Where is the disconnect? There's no congruity or continuity between between California and Florida. It's very different. I've also seen the labs. I've seen some of the reference ranges in the VA labs. I saw a 27-year-old, and the reference range said 179 to 650 was healthy levels.
What, a test?
I can tell you, and I think
179? Oh my God.
I can tell you, I think I'm fairly feminine woman. I'm on testosterone as well as progesterone and estrogen in my lovely perimenopause journey. But I keep my testosterone like 120 to 150. So you can imagine a 27-year-old male with the same testosterone level as me. And the VA says, you're good. You're healthy.
That's crazy. So in your opinion, what would it be? The minimal level?
Really, it varies. There's no right or wrong. I would say most guys are going to feel good or feel okay. 500-600. You may not be feeling symptoms of deficiency, but you have to understand we peak and we trough. So if I'm checking your labs at 8 a.m., I may see a very big difference if I were to check your labs at 5 p.m., 6 p.m.
Oh, really? Drastic difference between just the time of day.
Everyone's a little bit different. Obviously, we have physiologic levels that we need to be within. Anything over 12, 1500, you're really reaching the point of diminishing returns. You're kind of getting into an area where you're bringing on a lot of side effects that you have to mitigate. Most guys are going to feel great, 800, 900, 1000, as long as those hormones are all balanced well. And it's a total picture. It's not just here's some testosterone, you're going to feel better. It's balancing the testosterone to estrogen, making sure that, your cortisol levels, that you don't have a suppressed cortisol awakening response. It's bigger than just a testosterone. And it's also important to understand that we're all different. But if I could say one thing to the young guys out there, when you feel amazing is when you want to get those labs. See what that looks like for you. So you have a benchmark when you do go through andropause or whatever you need to have hormone replacement therapy. We know what great for you looked like on paper because you may have felt great at 700, 800. And that tells me that's what I'm going to shoot for. We'll see how you feel and we'll go from there.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes absolute sense. I'm still kind of bugging out at the 175 being sufficient for the VA.
Was their body.
179.
My jaw dropped. And I can honestly say, I'm sad to say, he was a St. Petersburg guy. So it was my VA hospital that I had worked for. Yeah.
I think when I initially got mine tested, it was low. It was double that. It was like 350, and I was feeling like garbage. So I can't imagine being half of that.
You likely will
And
50 range for sure. And especially if you have normal estrogen, because you're going to feel estrogen dominant. So you're going to be very emotional on top of not having any energy and all the effects of the low testosterone.
it was so funny. Someone recently was telling me when his estrogen goes a little bit high, he cries a lot. I don't know why, it was just cracking me up. Um, but yeah, I definitely, when my estrogen has gotten high, just you can feel something is off. So, you guys who are watching this right now, if you're going through TRT and you're feeling great, and then all of a sudden you're not, get your levels checked because something, either your test is too low again, estrogen's too high, something is out of whack to take you out of that, feeling good
The balance.
range.
The balance.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes it's a case of the testosterone is too high and it's aromatizing too much to estrogen, and that's causing your estrogen to be too high because it was already normal, So it's about balance.
Right. Makes sense. Let me ask you if anything, or you want to talk about anything that I haven't touched upon that we may not know, something super important. Um,
Well, I will say, obviously just recognizing in your population, the police officer population, it's important to get those labs to see what your hormone levels look like. A full panel, not just the sex hormones, because there's effects of the hormones. So you need to look at your prostate. You need to look at your CBC so we can see how many red blood cells you're making, how viscous is your blood, your metabolic panel, because I'm seeing a lot of metabolic dysfunction from what we're calling, service operator syndrome or operator syndrome. It leads to a lot of insulin resistance. And so we're seeing really high triglyceride levels and fatty liver disease as an effect of that. So really just get your labs drawn. Ask your primary care provider, if you have one, if they'll do a comprehensive metabolic and hormone panel. If they won't, there's tons of companies online that will do them for you. If you're Texas or Florida, I can do them for you. Out of pocket maximum, you shouldn't pay over, $150, $200 for that panel.
oh, that's it.
At least get in
Wow.
front of a doctor and see what you're working with to go from there.
Right.
And it doesn't
Yeah.
always mean because your testosterone is low that you need to take testosterone. Some people want to take a more holistic approach, and there's natural supplements that we can use. We've learned that we can influence the bioavailability of your testosterone with things like boron and L-carnitine and ashwagandha and omegas. We don't always have to go right to HRT. And a bioidentical hormone replacement therapy isn't always injections of testosterone either. There's sublingual troches. There's while I'm not a huge proponent of them, there's pellets that are placed under the skin. There's transdermal cream that, just a little bit of lotion you apply to your skin. So it's not always injections either.
Yeah. I used the cream when I first started using it, and it just, I don't know, it seems like it's much better regulated for me anyway, doing injections. I break them up twice a week. And frankly, it's been life-saving. I don't know, just the quality of life is so much better.
That's it.
And this medicine that you practice in it, we're seeing now, is so much more progressive than we had yesteryear. It's incumbent upon guys and girls to go in and, experience some of this, because it is literally life-changing stuff. Unfortunately, some of these things like peptides aren't covered by insurance, so it's going to be out of pocket sometimes. But to me,
They're
it's an
affordable.
investment. Yeah, they're affordable, and it's an investment well worth making. You're investing in yourself and your body. I mean, what is more valuable than that?
Absolutely. But again, it's frustrating when you pay for the health insurance or you're with the, TRICARE and they won't cover those things. That sermorelin, for instance, is already FDA approved. Why is it not covered? We see the positive benefits. Scientific evidence has proven it's safe and it works. Why can't we provide it to you? Your sleep is so important. And like you said, if you're not sleeping well, you're not going to feel well. You're going to have a down regulation. You're going to have a daytime, exhaustion that leads to you not being whole and being the you that you should be. A little bit of sermorelin at bedtime, night and day difference for some people who aren't making a lot of human growth hormone. And if you look at the standard trajectory of how our human growth hormone declines, 35 years old, Google it. It looks like a slide in a park. It's a huge on it about 30 years old. So you're 40 years old and you're not sleeping well. Check your IGF-1, which is your measurement of your human growth hormone, and see where that's at. And if it's low, sermorelin is an amazing approach to improving the human growth hormone with an amino acid peptide. It's safe.
Yeah, it's great. And I'll tell you, it was nuts. It was so when I got my disability pension, I also got Social Security disability. Went on to Medicare as my primary, and they no longer covered. Just they don't cover testosterone. So I was like, what? My old insurance, Blue Cross Blue Shield covered it, no problem. So not that it was a huge deal or anything like that, but definitely surprised me. So if you guys are
Frustrating because we know the benefits and we know
yeah,
that you're going to age differently. And you would think it behooved the insurance company, who ultimately is, financially
exactly.
for your health at the end of the day. The 80-year-old you is going to be a different man if you live 40 years deficient in testosterone than the 80-year-old you who was replacing that testosterone.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like even PRP, I talk to my doctors because it's not covered. So I have two arthritic knees. I get it done, and I'm like, I don't understand this. These guys would rather pay for me to get two knee replacement surgeries than they would for PRP, which is going to stave it off potentially forever. I don't understand it.
It's frustrating. The
Yeah,
whole medical model in general is frustrating, and that's why I've gone away from it. I do offer to my patients, I will do my best to help you get it covered. If it means I have to do a prior authorization and fight with the insurance company, I do day in and day out. I spent half of my morning doing prior authorizations and appeals letters, and it's maddening that
I
they
can't imagine.
billions and trillions of dollars from us, and they're not doing what they agreed to do for that money.
Yeah, yeah, I can't imagine. It was not funny, but the outrage and the support for that guy Luigi was it Mangione, the guy who killed the healthcare CEO in New York. Man, you saw the frustration pouring out of people. There were messages that I was frankly shocked at from, you know, moms and dads. And when you hear some of these stories that they were kind of reiterating about what they've gone through, it's disgusting
It
what
is.
people have to go through, fighting tooth and nail to get treatments that should have been covered sometimes.
And
It's
delaying care.
incredible.
Delaying care.
Yeah.
Maybe we do get it covered ultimately, but it took us 6 months to get the approval. And this patient's maybe they couldn't afford to pay out of pocket for whatever that care was or that service was. I have so many patients, women with menopause effects, and they need pelvic floor therapy. And I'm giving them workouts that they can do at home to strengthen their pelvic floor when we've got physical therapy doctors that are trained to do this, to strengthen their pelvic floor, and we can't get coverage for them. And that's just something small. I mean, imagine what people are going through with a child with cancer.
Oh,
Your
yeah.
damage system is broken, and I'm not sure that we're going to fix it. I think that we have to take the rope ourselves for our
Yeah.
advocate
Uh,
for ourselves.
how can it be fixed? There's so many, the lobby system is so strong. And they're paying these guys, I don't care. They're paying them under the table, whether or not anyone wants to acknowledge it. And paying these politicians. So things are never going to change, unfortunately. There's just so much money involved.
Benefit managers just raking it in. Yep.
Yeah, it's the system is so corrupt. I don't know if you're familiar with Ben Askren. He's a UFC fighter.
Not for
He just had a double lung transplant. So he came in, he just had some sort of infection and it went to his lungs. It's super, super healthy guy, and had to get a double lung transplant, which wasn't covered by his insurance company, which blew me away. Um, and I can't even imagine how much he's on the hook for. They're doing GoFundMe's, and he's somewhat famous, so I'm assuming a bunch of money will come in. I don't know how much it's going to cover, but so you tell me I can hit with something like that, a double lung transplant. I have the potential. My insurance company be like, no, sorry, we're not covering it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
And it's
disgusting.
why even have the health insurance? I mean,
Yeah.
catastrophic, but that's why, there's so many of these concierge physicians out there now that they've left the standard medical model. They're tired of the numbers game, where they're not really able to spend time with their patients, give them the time that they need to truly do an assessment. I mean, a standard family practice operation, you're going to see every nurse practitioner that is the one seeing the doctors or seeing the patients.
Yep. It's
So
patients.
you've got one doctor, maybe 10 nurse practitioners, and they each have 15 minutes for each patient. And that includes looking the patient up, looking at their history, their med list, kind of reconciling their medication, what they've experienced up until now, going in, meeting the patient, assessing the patient, maybe ordering labs, having those labs drawn, going back, letting the doctor know what we're going to do. Okay, yeah, do that, order it, type up your report, all of that. You've got 15 minutes. So how much quality do you think there is in that care?
Exactly. Yeah, that's why we just put Band-Aids on things and not get into the root cause of the problem, because there's no time you can find out what the problem is.
If you come to me for a problem and I throw a pill at you, you're going to feel like you got an answer when you walk out the door. Okay,
Exactly.
I'm going to be better. I'm going to be better. So that's
Yep. And he never touched the root cause or whatever it was.
never even questioned how you're eating, how you're sleeping, how's your stress,
Yeah.
vitamin D.
Exactly. It's amazing. It's such a holistic approach that needs to be taken. And frankly, it can't be because you guys are on the time constraints. It is so frustrating. I can't imagine being in your shoes.
Well, I don't work in that model. I just don't.
Joe, yeah.
My clients, my new intakes are an hour. I mean, how many times have we sat on the phone for an hour for consultation? It takes time. And truly, you think back to how medicine used to be. The doctor used to have his little medicine bag and he came to your home. He knew your family. He knew when your wife were coming. They were very involved. There was trust. Now, do you even know your doctor? I mean, do you even ever talk to them? Do they know you? Anything about your life? It's very different now.
Yeah, I'd agree when in New York that I frankly hated leaving, but that is definitely an anomaly because you don't see that these days. And it is what it is. But it's great that we have you, so I love it.
Well, thanks. It's been great.
Yeah, absolutely. So please tell us or tell the guys and girls if they want to get in touch with you how to do so. If they want to get you for medical treatments, how do they get you? All the links will be in the bio.
Absolutely. So Renew Wellness, we're in Bulverde, Texas. We're just north of San Antonio. I practice telemedicine as well, so video consultations. Basically, the process is you fill out an intake with your health history, consent to treat. I order some labs if you haven't already had those done. If you have been lucky enough to get your primary to do those labs and you just want kind of a second opinion or someone to read them over with you and go over them and explain them to you, because that's another thing that doctors don't typically do. That's the next step of the process. We determine a plan of care. We either order the medication from your local retail pharmacy or from a compounding pharmacy and have it mailed to you. And then we follow up about a month later just to see how things are going. If the patient hasn't reached out yet, we repeat those labs about 8 or 12 weeks later. And then once we have you dialed in well and hormones are balanced, we're now just working towards health and wellness. We'll do those labs every 6 months to make sure we're maintaining good health and kind of adjust as the patient's goals change. If you are not in Texas or Florida, I do have colleagues that I can refer you to in your area that are trustworthy providers that practice similar to me. If you're looking for someone in your area for a brick and mortar, look for a functional wellness provider. You're going to do a lot better with a functional wellness root cause medicine provider. Likely to pay out of pocket, typically. A lot of what we do is not covered by insurance. The sick care system doesn't like health and wellness.
Yeah, exactly.
But we're renewwellnesstx.com on the internet, and we're on social media, and phone number is 1-800-465-2190.
All right. Thank you very much, you guys. I use Dawn, so I couldn't give a bigger recommendation that my wife and myself trust her. So, you've heard her speak. She's fantastic. Please reach out if you guys are looking for something more progressive, more holistic, and I promise you, you will not be sorry. Dawn, thank you very much. It's been a fantastic hour speaking to you, so informative, and I loved having you as a guest.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Guys, if you like what you saw, hit like and subscribe, and we will see you soon.